Okay, so when we're thinking about foods that you want to be avoiding during pregnancy, I break this into two main categories.
What is your suggestion to moms who are having severe morning sickness? Like, what is that food they can start their day with? Yeah.
But for someone with nausea, that churning feeling is not going to be very comfortable at all. And so
At least 3 months before planning the baby, they have to be on top of their nutritional needs, right?
yeah, I think it's so important that we talk about the partner's role too, because again, I think so much pressure falls on the mom or, the mom to be.
Hi mamas, welcome back to another episode of Mom's Abilities. Today's episode is a must listen for anyone who's planning for pregnancy and every mom to be. I am joined by Bradie Hutton, who's a perinatal dietitian, and we'll be talking about all things nutrition. We will be diving deep into the preconception and how you should nourish your body before planning a baby. We'll be moving on to what to eat during your first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester. If you haven't subscribed to Mom's Abilities, do it now so that you don't miss any important information and our best episodes. Welcome to Mom's Abilities, Bradie. I am so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for us to dive into perinatal nutrition. There's so much for us to talk about today.
Yeah, before we dive deep into our conversation, starting from preconception, I would just like you to introduce yourself to the audience and talk about your area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a perinatal and pediatric registered dietitian with an organization called Push Mama Care. I have always loved working with kids. So from a young age, I was working with kids, and that kind of sparked an interest in pediatric nutrition once I started my education. It led me to be interested in things like food literacy and raising healthy eaters, and I directed a lot of my projects and studying to that. And from that area, I kind of moved into exploring prenatal nutrition through my master's as I was a student with Toronto Public Health and their Healthiest Babies Possible program. And that's where I figured out that perinatal nutrition is the area that I am so passionate about, and I really love this topic. It can be so impactful to support moms on this journey and make sure that their bodies are getting everything that they need to be supporting their health during pregnancy. So this is one of my favorite topics, and it's something that I really specialize in and focus on at Push.
Wonderful. Bradie, when we talk about preconception, this really means like setting the foundation for yourself before you even plan the baby, right? So how can we educate our mom listeners or anybody who's planning for a pregnancy for the preconception phase, like what is important and how to nourish their bodies to prepare themselves to have a baby?
So we definitely, when we're thinking about, prenatal nutrition, we do want to start early on. Your nutrition up to 3 months prior to a pregnancy can be impacted, can impact the pregnancy. So it is something that we do want to start thinking about early on. The sooner, really, the better, because building habits takes time too. So
Absolutely.
Even if you were to think about like 3 months prior to pregnancy, making changes at that time, we may not get everything in line kind of in time for the full impact that we can have. So I would say the sooner that moms can think about planning for pregnancy leading up to trying to conceive and thinking about nutrition changes, then the better.
What do you think? Like 3 months could be like the minimum time that is required?
The minimum time, yeah. And that's kind of the timing that, again, we already kind of want to have things ideally in line.
Yeah.
Because it takes 3 months time for those impacts really to take action and support perinatal health. We ideally want to kind of have things in line by that 3-month mark leading up to pregnancy, if possible. Of course, not everything can be planned, and we don't always have that perfect timeline. That's totally okay, but when possible, it is ideal, I would say.
It's a great topic to discuss about now, because anybody who's like planning to have a baby maybe 6 months later or next year is the perfect time so that they can, prepare themselves that at least 3 months before planning the baby, they have to be on top of their nutritional needs, right?
Yeah.
And if we talk about key nutrients that a woman should start taking before conceiving, what are those key nutrients?
So the main nutrient that we want someone to be taking prior to conception would be folic acid or folate. That is a very, very important one because we know that deficiency can increase the risk of neural tube defects. So it's a really important one that anyone who is thinking about having a baby, actively trying to conceive, that the woman is taking folic acid or folate in that period. It is something that other nutrients, I would say, are specific to mom's diet or any other nutritional deficiencies. For example, we know that iron is a very common deficiency that so many women experience. So it may be a good idea to be taking an iron supplement in addition. A vitamin D supplement, again, deficiency is incredibly common in Canada.
Yeah.
So oftentimes folic acid would be, I would say, the across the board blanket recommendation at minimum, but there are often other nutrients that someone may benefit from based on their individual diet and based on lab work or tests that they've had done. So it is a little individual. A general prenatal can help to also act as an insurance policy. There are so many options out there in terms of prenatals, so that is something to navigate all in and of itself. But a good quality prenatal supplement is definitely something that at least 3 months prior to pregnancy, taking that daily is a good thing.
So when we're talking about folic and folate, are these two you're talking about taking in terms of like supplements, or we should also consider including that in our diet? And would that be sufficient to have these two incorporated in our diet?
Good question. So folic acid is the supplemental form, and we do want to be taking a supplement of it. Folate is incredibly valuable in our diet, but it is very susceptible to loss. So for example, it is not very heat stable, so cooking significantly reduces. We know that some women have trouble with absorption based on genetic variations. So it is something that we do want to be taking the supplement of it, but dietary sources, of course, may help to increase our intake.
And the supplements also we should start around 3 months before starting?
Exactly, yeah, at least 3 months before. Most prenatal supplements, so when I say prenatal supplements, I'm kind of referring to all of the different prenatal
Combined.
multivitamins.
Right.
Yeah. And most will have folic acid or folate in them in varying amounts based on the prenatal.
Yeah.
Prenatals are, a challenge for some women because some people have really uncomfortable or unpleasant side effects coming up from them. They don't necessarily sit the best, or they don't often make them feel good. Every single person is different. Some people have no problems with them. So at minimum, if you're not tolerating a prenatal well, you do want to then be trying to take folic acid.
Would there be any best time to take it? Because I remember there's like one which is AM and PM, right? So what's the best time to take it? Before meal, after meal? What do you suggest?
So it's actually a flexible one for folic acid. So you can really take it any time of day. You can take it with or without food. So it is one that is flexible. There are certain vitamins and minerals that have a little bit more strict rules or suggestions around timing. For example, when you mentioned like the AM PM pills, that prenatal in particular, the reason that it's separated is because iron is going to do best on an empty stomach in the morning. And so it kind of, again, depends on the contents of the prenatal, but if you're just taking folic acid, it's really flexible. You can take that at a convenient time, and sometimes that's the most important thing, right? If we are forgetting to take our supplements, if we are not in a good routine with them, and we're not taking it at all, we don't have the benefit. So sometimes the convenience aspect and making sure that you are able to regularly take it is the most important thing, rather than thinking about what is the best time to take it, if that makes sense.
Since you mentioned about forgetting sometimes, right? I think it's very common, forgetting to take any vitamins, right? So what happens if you forget like a day or two? Does that matter a lot?
That is absolutely okay. We're all human. We all have days where we're going to be a little bit off track with whether it's our supplements or our diet. The most consistently that we can take it, that is amazing, but I never want anyone to feel badly if they miss a day here or there. What I generally suggest to help with adherence is trying to tie it to a routine. So for some people, that might be before they make breakfast in the morning. For other people, it might be before they brush their teeth. Tying it to something that you consistently do in your routine can just help to make that supplement routine as well. So that can be something that can help to reduce missing doses, but of course, we're all human. There may be a day missed here and there.
So not to overthink it.
Not to overthink it.
Yeah.
Just do your best and make sure that you're trying to get it in as often as possible.
Are there any foods that could be beneficial in the conception period?
Yeah, absolutely. So our diet, the reason why we want to be thinking about it 3 months prior to pregnancy is because it can be supportive of egg quality, regulating our reproductive hormones. It can help in terms of supporting implantation. It also, when we're thinking about male factor, can help with sperm quality and motility as well. So both partners really can be thinking about their diet 3 months before. And when we're thinking about specific foods or nutrients, a place that I suggest starting is just working towards regularly fueling your body. So thinking first about timing and spacing of eating can be a really good first step, because the more opportunities that we have throughout the day to fuel our body, the more nutrients that we can include, right? So regularly eating throughout the day is generally my first suggestion. It can be easy to get off track with work or get a busy morning where we miss a meal or skip a snack. And those are just missed opportunities. So starting off by eating regularly, and from there then thinking about the balance that we're including with meals and snacks. There are a couple of key nutrients that I do focus on with preconception health. One of the first things is making sure that we're having a diet that's packed with healthy fats. So that could be anything from things like nuts, seeds, nut butters, avocado, full fat dairy as well, fatty fish, plant-based oils. We want to make sure that these foods are high in our diet. We have lots of healthy fats, because those healthy fats will help to increase your omega-3 intake, which helps to reduce the damage that can occur on our eggs. So it helps to essentially support egg quality by increasing those foods. We also can think about increasing our antioxidant intake. So fruits, vegetables, any kind of brightly colored fruit and vegetable options increase antioxidants, which again help to preserve egg quality and also help to increase our fiber intake, which can support hormone balance through digestive health. So those are my top kind of 2 nutrient suggestions when someone is thinking about trying to conceive.
I like it how you said any kind of brightly colored fruits or vegetables. So like nobody has to really run to internet like, okay, what's the best for having antioxidants, right?
Yeah.
Anything that's brightly colored would be beneficial here. And then I remember you also mentioned about a partner's role here. If we have to talk about a bit of partner's role, how can we, how can we think of a partner's role in this situation?
I think it's so important that we talk about the partner's role too, because again, I think so much pressure falls on the mom or, the mom to be. And it is something that we know that the male factor does play a role in trying to conceive. We also know a recent study came out showing that the male's diet leading up to conception actually can impact a woman's symptoms during pregnancy and her prenatal health. So it is something that, the more that we can focus on both partners doing it together, not only is that supportive emotionally, but it does play a real role in chances of trying to conceive, as well as possibly prenatal outcomes.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so shocked to, hear that it can affect symptoms during pregnancy too. That's wonderful to know.
Yeah.
Moving on to first trimester, Bradie, which is like mostly about managing the symptoms, right? This is just the start of the journey, and it's not very smooth for a lot of moms, especially when it comes to morning sickness, fatigue, nausea, like throughout the day. So if we particularly talk about this time, how can we think of, how can we think of getting our nutritional requirements in the middle of having these symptoms, because it's like kind of, worrisome for a lot. Some women are not even able to eat properly. What are your thoughts about that?
My first suggestion to any mom who is experiencing pregnancy side effects or symptoms, whether that's nausea, vomiting, reflux, changes to bowel regularity, my first suggestion is that eating something is better than eating nothing at all. And again, there can be so much pressure around having a perfect, balanced pregnancy diet. And of course, it's something that as a dietitian, I encourage. I want someone to have a really well-balanced diet throughout pregnancy. It supports their health, it supports baby's health. But at the same time, if mom is experiencing symptoms that are making her feel unwell and she's not able to stomach a perfectly balanced meal, then having anything that is appealing at all is going to be still giving her body fuel for baby. So any food, my first rule, any food is better than no food at all.
Right.
And then when she is feeling able to, as she's feeling better, if those symptoms are subsiding, we then can always, again, work back towards that balance. But any food is going to be fuel for baby. So trying to alleviate some of that pressure or guilt that can come with not having that perfect and balanced diet, generally focusing on foods that we would refer to as simple carbs are going to be tolerated a lot better. So the white bread, the white rice, the white pasta. For some women, that's like fruits or citrus in particular. For some people, sits a lot better. There are these foods that we may not think of as being super nutritious, but they are still an energy source for your baby. So if those foods are sitting better, then that's what we want to lean on because it's still providing energy.
Which also tells me that carbs are totally fine during this, because I've heard a lot of people saying you should not take carbs, which could not be true because carbs are equally important, right? But during this phase, you mean it's completely fine to, at the end of the day, we have to feed ourselves, right? So not really worry about what we are eating, of course, except for the packaged food and all those junk foods, right? If we talk about morning sickness, what is your suggestion to moms who are having severe morning sickness? Like, what is that food they can start their day with so that they feel better? Because it's like, again, very common symptom.
Yeah, it is one of the most common pregnancy symptoms. And for about 60% of women who experience nausea or vomiting or morning sickness, as we call it, it does subside by around week 13 or the end of first trimester. So I always say, just think about the light at the end of the tunnel. But it is such a challenging phase. One of my first suggestions is trying to take a look at what your triggers might be. So for some people, that may be that when they wake up and they start moving in their day, they feel that nausea kick in right away. For other people, it may be the smells when they're cooking can be really triggering. For some people, it could be specific foods are more triggering to their symptoms. For other people, it may be fluids and when they're eating and drinking water at the same time or something like that. So try to reflect on when your symptoms are occurring. And if there's anything that's possibly a common pattern with your symptoms, it will help us to best address it. Then if someone is having symptoms kind of consistently throughout the day, what we want to try to do is have smaller but more frequent meals or snacks regularly. Because generally, as much as you don't feel like eating when you're experiencing nausea or morning sickness, generally an empty stomach is actually going to make that a lot worse. Whenever you have an empty stomach, your body is going to start secreting digestive enzymes and juices as that stimulation for your appetite to try to get you to eat. But for someone with nausea, that churning feeling is not going to be very comfortable at all. And so having little bits to prevent that from coming up every roughly 2 hours, I would say is one of the most common suggestions or best suggestions. There are so many other tips. Some people find ginger really soothing, so having ginger candies or chews. Some people find lemon or citrus soothing. Some people find that cold foods sit a lot better than warm foods. So it can be somewhat individual, but I would say the most universal tip and starting point would be those small, frequent meals and snacks throughout the day.
What about eating for two? Something that I've heard a lot. Is that really true?
Yeah, so that is not necessarily the case, especially during first trimester. So in first trimester, your energy needs actually don't change. So you can keep eating the same amount that you would have been having before pregnancy. Your energy needs don't increase until later in pregnancy. So eating for two, when we are eating for two, we can think of it as fueling for two, but not necessarily doubling your intake, right? So we do need to increase and eat a little bit more throughout pregnancy when your energy needs increase. But in first trimester, you can actually keep eating the exact same amount that you typically would. The bigger challenge is often eating enough in first trimester, right? But we definitely don't need to double our intake in terms of nutrition during pregnancy. Eating for two is something that is definitely a common question that I get, and we don't necessarily need to think of that as two adult portions.
And this is common for all trimester, we can say?
So your needs start to change around second trimester. Around second trimester is the biggest kind of nutrition shift, and at that stage we need to have a little bit more. Generally, I suggest trying to listen to your appetite, which it can be a challenge again when a lot of things are affecting how you're feeling and how you're eating, but that first change happens around kind of second trimester, and that is where the biggest kind of nutrition shift comes.
So not really doubling the quantity, but increasing the nutrient-dense foods, right?
Yes. And, in second trimester, let's say, that may be an extra balanced snack in the day or a small meal. The estimation as to how much extra would be needed in second trimester is roughly about 300 to 350 extra calories per day. But research shows us that this does vary from person to person. So the amount that one person needs extra is not going to be the same as another. And that's where trying to tune into your appetite. And if you're experiencing hunger throughout the day, if your body isn't feeling satisfied, that is a really good sign that we need to be trying to increase your intake to meet your needs.
Bradie, before we talk deeply about second trimester, I have one last question.
Of course.
If we look at someone who's having low appetite, which is very likely in the first trimester, what are the foods that will provide like high nutrition during that time, even if they have low appetite? Like these are the snacks that they could go to, and that would benefit them a lot.
Okay, so I would suggest that if we are thinking about someone who has low appetite, is not able to get a really well-balanced diet, I would prioritize, first of all, eating anything that appeals to them, first and foremost. But the second thing is, if possible, to include some protein sources throughout your day. That's going to be really helpful as well. That could be anything from things like nuts and seeds, things like Greek yogurt, things like cottage cheese, legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas. It can also be things like poultry, fish, eggs, but I will say those are really common aversions that a lot of women experience. That's why I suggest some of the plant-based protein options first, because they tend to sit a little bit better, and food aversions to animal-based proteins can be a really, really common one that a lot of women navigate.
There could be something that they have to avoid, like it's a big no-no during these 3 months.
Okay, so when we're thinking about foods that you want to be avoiding during pregnancy, I break this into two main categories. So the first is foods that put someone at increased risk of contracting a foodborne illness, or what we would call kind of food poisoning. And the second are foods that can affect baby for other reasons. With foods that we want to avoid for foodborne illness, we want to avoid these foods because a pregnant woman is at increased risk of contracting foodborne illness because she has a suppressed immune system. The body, with how pregnancy hormones work, actually reduces kind of immune function. And that is a really good thing. It's a protective mechanism because your body cannot treat your baby like a foreign substance. We want it to accept that pregnancy, right? And so that suppressed immune function is good, but it does lead to that increased risk of contracting foodborne illness. Those foods that we want to avoid would be a lot of the common ones that we would think of. So that would be anything from things like raw fish or meats. It would be things like deli meats or cured meats. It would be things like meat spreads, undercooked eggs, certain cheeses, unpasteurized dairy or juices, raw bean sprouts. So we want to lessen these foods for risk of foodborne illness. And I will say that there is a lot of mixed information out there about these foods right now. There are a lot of sources that say we don't need to avoid these foods anymore, that is kind of outdated recommendations or evidence. But we also don't have a lot of research to show us what foods within these groups are safer to consume. And so I always say it's kind of mom's risk aversion level. So if a mom wants to be more cautious and take the safest route possible, I generally do suggest avoiding these foods. If she feels comfortable in the fact that these foods are properly cleaned, stored, sourced, cooked, then it helps to reduce the risk. Then that is considered to be a safer way to reduce, again, that risk of foodborne illness. But I would say the safest thing is avoidance of these foods. The other foods that we have to avoid during pregnancy would be things like caffeine, certain herbal teas. We also have to be avoiding higher mercury fish, alcohol. So these foods are options where certain nutrients or chemicals or compounds can actually cross the placenta and put baby at risk for various reasons, depending on the option. So we do want to be limiting or completely avoiding these options depending on the food. But those are some of the top ones that we want to be thinking about avoiding during pregnancy.
You mentioned about caffeine. Okay, I am very curious to ask about coffee because I'm someone who has to start her day with coffee.
Yeah.
What do you think about coffee? Like, should someone completely eliminate it from the diet?
So coffee is actually something that I'm totally okay with a mom having and enjoying a little bit throughout her pregnancy. In terms of our caffeine recommendations, so in Canada, we use the World Health Organization recommendations, which suggest limiting caffeine to less than 300 milligrams per day. The US and UK have a bit more conservative guidelines. They suggest limiting to 200 milligrams per day. But it is something that having a small amount each day can be considered safe for baby. And to give you kind of an idea, a cup of drip coffee would have about 100 milligrams of caffeine. That could vary based on the roast, based on the brewing method. But in general, having a cup of coffee a day is considered to be safe. And it's also, again, that kind of risk benefit, right? If a mom feels so fatigued, she's not feeling well, and that cup of coffee just happens to give her that extra energy to feel a little bit better in her day or have that little bit of enjoyment, I think that benefit far outweighs the risk of a little bit of caffeine. Especially, again, we do want to keep it below that safe number that we have, but it is something that the benefit can really outweigh the risk there.
I am 100% sure that this is going to relieve a lot of moms to be, because coffee is something like, for me, I just assumed that, okay, it's like a big no, maybe I should not take, right? But then if you say 300 milligrams, it could be like 2 cups, but 1 cup for sure anybody can take. It's safe to take a cup of coffee one day.
And it is really important too. So for example, if you get your coffee out, to give an example, like a Starbucks coffee, their tall coffee is already to that maximum, right? So it is important. Take a look at the nutrition fact where you get your coffee, or take a look at kind of, again, like your brewing method at home and the type of coffee that you have. But generally, kind of a cup of coffee a day is okay. You do also want to be considering other sources too. So things like tea, espresso, chocolate as well. The darker, the more caffeine it has. So those contribute a little bit too. So if you're having other sources, it is really important to take those into account with your total daily intake too.
And then again, out of my own curiosity, I want to ask about what cheese can we take, it's safe to take, and what cheeses are like something a big no, we have to avoid at all costs.
Yeah. So the safest cheeses to be taking would be hard, firm cheeses. So things like Parmesan, things like cheddar, Swiss, Monterey Jack. These are considered safe options because the harder the cheese, the lower the moisture content. And And moisture is something that can be a good breeding ground for bacteria. So if we can have the harder options, those are going to be our safest. Cheeses that are semi-soft, soft, or blue veined are considered to be those recommended options to avoid. So that could be anything from things like feta to goat cheese to Havarti cheese, or again, any blue cheeses, camembert, brie. But again, this is a really controversial topic right now. So if you do want to enjoy those cheeses, that is where, again, risk benefit kind of comes in. And what I would say is a pasteurized version is going to be the most important thing. So you can always look at the food label and choose options that come from a pasteurized milk product. The other way that we can really reduce our risk, if you do want to enjoy those cheeses, is having them until they are cooked steaming hot. So for example, like a baked brie dish is an option that can be totally safe to enjoy, because that heat is going to help to reduce the risk and kill any harmful microorganisms that could have been present there.
Got it. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we dive into second trimester?
I think that basically covers, the biggest challenges that a lot of women have. I would say eat what you can, do your absolute best, but also have a lot of self-compassion. It is something that your body is going through an experience it has never had before. You're going to be feeling a lot of things and a lot of physical and emotional and mental changes. So do your absolute best, but lead with self-compassion and know that, it will be okay if you are living off of white bread or soda crackers for a stretch of time.